And one more. Cody, you are up.
All right.
And again, I will send you a private message if you happen to hit 12 minutes. But we'll let you get your screen up and going.
Okay. Is that working?
1 second. It says you've started screen sharing. Yes. Yep. There you go. So just go into
All right, cool.
slide mode and then you'll be good to go.
Present.
Yes.
Perfect.
All good. Okay. You are up.
All right, so I am presenting on the Voynich manuscript. So if you're not familiar with what that is, the Voynich manuscript is it's this old book that was written in the medieval period, and it's an unknown language. It's completely uncracked. Cryptographers and linguists, it's been kind of like a curiosity that people have been studied since it's been discovered, and no one's been able to crack it still to modern day. It's filled with pictures, which kind of lead us to guess at the content, and here's kind of an example of what the language looks like. So just to give a brief background of the history, we don't know who wrote it, but we know that it was written between 1404 and 1438, and carbon dating gives a 95% certainty on that date. The first confirmed order was a man named George Bach in the Czech Republic. There's been some speculation as to people who've owned it before him, but no one really knows who uncovered it or how it got to him. The first actual written mention of it was in 1639. The name Voynich manuscript comes from a man named Wilfrid Voynich, who was the Polish antiquarian who bought it in 1912 and brought it to America. He's kind of the one who made it public and kind of advertised it per se. And then after he died, his family sold it to a bookseller who later donated it to Yale University. There was a couple other people in between them, but it's not super important. And it's still held at Yale University, but the entire text is available online for people to look at. So like I said, the VMS contained a bunch of illustrations. This lets us figure out the content, sorry. The entire manuscript is split into chapters or books, kind of like sections that have similar content based on the pictures, and it goes botany, astronomy, biology, cosmology, pharmacy, and then the last section is called a couple different names by people, recipes or stars. It's a long section with a bunch of text in paragraphs with really no illustrations, so we're not sure what that section's about, but the rest of them have been figured out by context. And an interesting thing about the illustrations is that a lot of them aren't real things. Like, I think like 80% of the plants are just like pictures. They don't actually correspond with real plants. There've been a couple that people have been able to identify, but most of them, like this one, isn't actually a real thing. It's just a drawing. So no one's really been able to discern what exactly that means. Oh, here's a couple more pictures. Another plant, some cosmology stuff. I have no idea what's going on in this one, but it looks cool. Um, so there was four main theories when the VMS was uncovered as to what the alphabet of the VMS signifies. The first theory is that it's an actual language that was spoken a long time ago, but has been lost to time and is now extinct. The second theory is that it's an encryption of some language that they haven't figured out. The third theory is that it's not actually a real language at all, and that it was just a hoax that they wrote this fake language with all of these pictures to sell for a high price, and it was sold for a very high price, which is why people think that written in the medieval time, like Voynich claimed, but he was the one who wrote it, which was feasible at the time because he was a very intelligent man with history of collecting old things like this, and he would have had enough knowledge to do that. Except later, with carbon dating, they figured out that the parchment and the book and the ink was actually in the medieval period. So the last theory was disproved later on, but the rest of them are all still subject to debate. So here's an example of the language. The letters there that's not a translation. Like I said, we haven't encrypted it. the letters just this is the scheme that was used back when computers were getting big. So people used these letters to correspond on punch cards to the letters in the Voynich manuscript, and English transcriptions use these letters to correspond to the alphabet in the Voynich manuscript. Like I said, we don't know what the language is, but there's a lot of Latin written in the margins of the book. So some people have tried to see if it's encrypted Latin, and analysis of the average word length also shows that the words are similar length to Latin, English, Ukrainian, or Flemish Creole, which is a Dutch dialect. It's also interesting because even though there's one alphabet, the letter and substring frequency shows that there's actually different patterns between two different halves of the books, which actually show that there's two different languages inside this one book. And both of those sections are written with different handwriting, which means that there's at least two authors, and people have speculated that there might be up to 8 or more within the book. So there's been word distribution profiling, which shows that there's patterns between the words. So this is one of the main arguments that it isn't a fake document, because there's a lot of heavy patterns. You can see these are some of the main patterns. The thicker lines show a stronger correlation between the different words here. And this is using the same scheme that I showed earlier, where English letters are used to substitute for the VMS letters. And the interesting thing about these sets of words is that in the botanical section and the pharmaceutical section, both of those heavily deal with plants, obviously, and they have similar word frequencies, which kind of go along with, okay, these are actually different topics. It isn't just a fake language. And recipes and astrology are the same way. So I don't remember if I thought we might have talked about Markov models a bit in this class, but maybe I'm just imagining that from stats class. But you can use these models, which are statistical models that just basically determine the probability of each character based on these hidden previous states of the characters. And one of the main uses for this is to find the distinction between the consonants and the vowels in the language. The algorithms put into the computer did find a distinction, but it's not as strong a distinction in other languages, and there are I don't want to say a lot, but there's several words that don't actually have any vowels, which has led to some confusion, and they're not sure exactly why that is. Some people think that maybe it's kind of the case with the English Y, where it can be used as a consonant and a vowel. And there was a linguist who proposed a phoneme set for what each letter might sound like based on the consonant and vowel distinction. There's some graph theory has been done to show the relationship between words, kind of like I said similarly. And you can see that you have these complex charts, which once again implies that the word order isn't just arbitrary. And there's fractal analysis software, which kind of is in a similar vein of the graph theory, puts the VMS in the same dimension set as Hemingway's novel, The Old Man and the Sea, and the Bible, which give this strong correlation between a real language. Also here's an example of a word cloud, just to kind of show that same thing, where the right one is the Bible and the left one is the VMS, to show that they have similar word frequencies. On the topic of encryption, no one's been able to figure out what encryption method was used. People have looked at a lot of different medieval encryption methods and haven't been able to crack it, so to speak. And like I said, we don't even know whether or not it is encrypted or if it's a real language. Some people have proposed that the images actually contain the key and they're hidden in there, because some of the images contain what look like letters hidden inside them, but they haven't been able to figure out exactly what the signification is of that. There's also captions for the images, which people have speculated the key might be hidden for, and there's a lot of, like I said, there's Latin words written in the margins. There's also some places where there's just letters that are scattered throughout the page that don't actually seem to have any meaning. So some people think the key might be hidden in there too. There's also the possibility that if it's encrypted, the key isn't contained in the document, which would make sense, and it was just hidden somewhere else, and we're not going to be able to find it. There are still people who think it's a hoax, despite all of the strong word relations that we saw earlier. There's some evidence that points to this, because there are no corrections anywhere within the text. If you were writing a long text, this is all in ink, so you can't erase anything. So if it was copied from something, or if it was written by scratch, you would expect that there'd have to be some stuff crossed off and there'd be some mistake. And there's nothing like that in the VMS. There's not as many repetitive phrases as you would expect to see in the plain text if it was encrypted. Another thing is that all of the words fit perfectly on the pages. There's nothing that like goes over. Paragraphs are very neat, which isn't necessarily evidence per se, but it's a little bit suggestive. And like I said earlier, the illustrations aren't real things. So we don't know exactly, since we don't know the actual content, it could just be that this is some kind of fictional thing, but people who think it's a hoax say that the fantastical illustrations is just to make it seem exotic and mysterious, to make it worth more money. And it was worth a lot of money. A lot of people profited off of this book. So there's some value to that. And there have been different computer scientists and linguists who have suggested methods of making a table of rules where you generate each group of letters based on the previous group of letters, or each group of words based on the previous group of words, which isn't necessarily impossible, but a lot of people doubt it, and I personally kind of doubt it, just because a lot of the bigram and trigrams within the text and a lot of the patterns, there wasn't the linguistic knowledge back in the medieval times to fake that sort of thing that we have now. Or nowadays, someone could make a document like this and make it very realistic and be able to say something like this, but it's kind of doubtful as to whether anyone would have been able to do it back in that time period. So that's all I have. Any questions?
All right, thank you. Any questions for Cody?
What do you personally think about it?
I think that based on the stuff I've read, I think the most likely thing is that it is a real language and not an encryption. Just because of stuff with like the hidden Markov models and stuff, it doesn't match up with like the letter frequency stuff that we've studied with encryption methods, but it's really hard to say. I'm definitely of the opinion that it's not a hoax, and that's what most scholars are, even though there's some who still argue that. But whether or not it's encrypted or a real language, I'm not entirely sure. No one's really sure, so.
Other questions?
Do they know that the Latin words were written down at the same time as all the other words, or could they have been added later?
I'm trying to remember, because I know that I believe that they were, because they were, with like the carbon dating, they were also able to analyze when the ink was added, and the ink was added very briefly after the vellum was created from animal hides. And I believe that the Latin words were written alongside the original text.
It's Rachel. I'm just curious, how did you hear about this even in the first place? Because I've never heard of this, and it's actually very interesting.
I was the last person to choose a topic, so I just looked at the available ones and was just looking up stuff from the list, and I saw that.
Okay.
Just a side note, there's a document on NSA.gov about this, so apparently it's pretty big. Yeah, I'd never heard about it either, but it's super interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Excellent, thank you. All right, I'll have you stop sharing your screen. Thank you to everybody who did presentations, either live or recorded. I will send out an email. I'm not sure if it'll be right after this or after my differential equations class, but I'll send out an email with the links to the pre-recorded presentations if you want to view any of those. And then just a reminder, so your presentation feedback, 5 presentations, any 5 you want, is due on Friday at noon. So that Word document is up. You can go back and watch recordings if you need to. You can watch some of the pre-recorded ones, but feedback on 5 presentations due on Friday at noon. Everybody good with all of that? Okay, your homework's not quite graded. I am still working on number 7 and number 8, so hopefully that will come back to you this afternoon or tomorrow morning. And then grading papers, I am over halfway done. My goal is to have those done by Friday. I don't have classes tomorrow, so today, this afternoon, and tomorrow is going to be my let's push and get papers done and graded, but they are going so far. So we're getting there. They're coming. Anything else? Otherwise, Friday whirlwind tour through everything. But anything else for questions at this point in time? Alrighty then, look for an email from me and I will see you on Friday for a big, gigantic whirlwind tour. Thanks guys, have a good day.
Bye.